Hello, my most amazing artists. Today is our last day for printmaking. You're going to have better paper this time for our final prints. This paper is special paper that is printmaking paper. You'll have black and white printmaking paper in your bins that you can choose from to try at any of the color stations today. If you are appointed and allowed by Ms. Q to do the ink at your table, please make sure that you're only doing about a dime to a quarter size amount and only rolling it in the middle of that tray. That way it doesn't waste the ink. You don't want to roll it out on the whole tray. You want to keep it right in the middle so you have the most ink possible on your brayer, but still an even coat, rolling from side to side. It's a good idea to keep your print on the paper and move it around with you. That way somebody else could start to ink up their printing plate and you could just move to the baron and start rubbing onto the paper. Or you could take your paper with you to another printing station and roll half with another color, as long as it's an analogous color or a color that's a neighbor on the color wheel. So yellow and pink will work well together because they will make orange. Let's see what happens when I go ahead and print with it. Just make sure that you're always using a clean piece of paper and rolling out a tape ring anytime that your paper gets too inky. Then you can rip that paper and take it along with you. Then I place the paper down and I rub it with the baron, making sure I apply even pressure and rub in circles. Once I press it down, I can't move it or my print will be ruined. Then I start to see the ink coming through. I can start to see my line, so it's time to peel it up once I make sure it's transferred. Ooh, okay, so if anybody caught that I didn't erase my printing plate, so what it did is it started mixing the colors underneath. So last week I had used blue last and I didn't get a chance to erase it or wipe it down with an art wipe. So that blue mixed in with the yellow and also the pink. If it was just blue and yellow, it would have just made green. Those are analogous colors, so that's okay. But because I also had the pink in there, it got a little bit brown. So make sure you're only mixing analogous colors, otherwise you're wiping your printing plate down either with a wet paper towel or a art wipe. Then you can print with analogous colors. Again, if Miss Q lets you put down the ink, you're only rolling out a little tiny bit the size of a quarter or a dime and keeping it in the center when you roll it on. You can still continue to do two different colors to kind of have an ombre tie-dye effect by rolling half and half. Now this time you'll notice I carefully picked up my printing plate, making sure not to get my fingerprints on it, and I'm going to do the opposite by placing it down onto a piece of paper. The reason I did this was because it's hard to see where I put it on a black paper. So I want to make sure that I level it down so that it's right in the center of that paper because the papers are a little bit bigger than your printing plate. You want to line it up evenly to make sure it's in the center. And there's a little bit of a border all the way around the edge. That black paper you won't be able to see when your lines come through, so you have to make sure you just apply enough pressure and hold it down in the same spot while you're rubbing. The black paper really stands out on colors like yellow, gold, and pink. Colors like red and blue are going to work better on the white paper because they are dark colors. So the black paper would be good for colors like yellow or green, colors that are hard to see on the white paper that we might not have been able to see such good prints last time. Remember, with the white paper, if you're deciding to put it down onto it to have an even border today, make sure that you put it right in the center and hover it over it before you stick it down. Once you stick that printing plate down, you can't move it. You got to start to rub and transfer the ink onto it. Make sure you're cleaning up as you go and throwing out any art wipes. After you make 3 good prints today on the new black or white paper, then you are going to get a new piece of printing plate or styrofoam as well as a tracing paper, just like how we started last time. Although this time you get to create your own symbol that represents you. That means it could be anything, any of your favorite things that you like to draw, something that represents you, or just something simple. The only rule is that it has to be school appropriate and probably no words unless you want to take on the challenge of writing those words backwards. That's why you have a tracing paper, so that you can erase if you make a mistake. Just be sure to pick something simple because we don't have a whole lot of time. The first part of class is going to be spent making 3 good prints on the new paper that you're making sure are centered with a border around them and making sure you have enough ink so they're not ghost prints, putting those on the drying rack, and then you'll get a new tracing paper and a piece of styrofoam and tape it to the styrofoam when you're done with your first drawing. I drew a paintbrush and an art palette because that represents me. I also challenged myself to draw the letters art backwards, but if you're not sure how to write something backwards, this is a tracing paper, meaning that you could just flip it over and you would be able to see those words backwards. So as long as you write it normally on the front and then tape it to the back, then it will show it how you can write it backwards. So that's a little bit of a trick that you can do to write something backwards if you absolutely need words today. Make sure it's only words like maybe something kind or something really positive and nothing too tiny. If you have positive words on there, that would be okay. You could also do your name backwards. Remember, you don't have to challenge yourself to draw it backwards. All you got to do is flip it over. But it's still a challenge to follow those directions so you don't have a backwards print of your letters. Then I'm going to carve into it after I trace with pen. So the first time I trace it with pen over top of my tracing paper. Then I throw out the tracing paper and I'm drawing directly onto the styrofoam with the stylus to carve into it. After I make sure that my lines are deep enough, knowing now that if they're not deep enough, a good print will not work, then I can go to the printing stations and print a few different times. Again, if you're the person that is allowed to put the ink on the printing plate, then you are going to make sure you're only doing the size of a quarter at most. Make sure that you're always taping it on with a tape ring onto the book so it doesn't move around. Roll out that ink and then roll out your new printing plate. We might not have a whole lot of time, so with this one, it's important that you just make like one, maybe two. Hopefully, you'll be able to make 3 of your self-portraits today and 1 or 2 of your new print of your symbol that represents you. This is not something that you have to do. You do have to do the self-portrait. This part is when you finish. Notice where I wanted it to look like wood on my paint palette, I carved in a little bit. If anything that you do not want to show up with color should be carved in. So you're doing a reverse drawing and anything that you draw is going to be where the ink does not go. Those are going to be the white if you use white paper or black if you use black paper lines that are left. So I'm going to make a couple of these prints and then put them all in the drying rack. If I am done with my printing plate, that can also go on the drying rack. I don't need to clean it off with an art wipe because that would be a waste of an art wipe, knowing that today is our last day of printing. So if you are already finished, you can leave it with the ink on the drying rack. It also kind of looks cool on the drying rack with ink. I think I'm going to leave my pink and yellow, that ombre one, on the drying rack just how it is because it's a piece of art by itself, that stamp. It's all part of the process and I cannot wait to display all of these self-portraits along with your symbol of you at our art show. All right, awesome artists, have a great last day of printing today.